Okay, picture this. You're in ancient Greece. There's this big banquet happening, lots of noise, people talking,
Right.
and then, boom, the roof caves in. Just chaos, tragedy. And afterwards, well, identifying the victims seemed impossible.
Terrible.
But
Yeah.
then this poet, Simonides of Chios, he stood up, and because he could vividly remember exactly where everyone was sitting, he could name them all.
Wow. Just from their seating positions.
Yeah. Talk about an incredible memory, right? And, the legend says that moment, that tragedy, was basically the birth of the art of memory.
That's fascinating, isn't it? How it immediately connects memory to a specific place.
Yeah.
Which, as we'll see, is something our brains are surprisingly good at.
Exactly. And that brings us here. Welcome, everyone, to the deep dive. We do the reading so you can get seriously well-informed fast.
Uh-huh.
Today, we've waded through some really fascinating material, specifically Joshua Foer's Moonwalking with Einstein, to explore the incredible world of human memory.
And our mission, really, is to unpack the history, the potential, maybe bust a few myths along the way.
Yeah, definitely bust some myths.
And even uncover some practical techniques you could, actually use. All without getting lost in too much jargon. We'll touch on ancient tricks, modern competitions, the science behind it all.
And how we forget things, too, which is just as important.
Absolutely. How we forget.
Okay, so let's start with the big one. This idea of photographic memory. That our brains are like perfect cameras just recording everything.
Right, the super recorder brain.
Yeah.
It's such a common idea. I mean, there was a survey back in 1980, I think,
Yeah.
and it found something like 84% of psychologists believe that pretty much everything we learn is like permanently stored up there, even if we can't always find it.
84%. So the experts thought our brains were infinite hard drives.
That was the prevailing idea,
Mhm.
yeah. But
Yeah.
is that really how it works? Are we all walking around with perfect recordings of our lives?
It feels unlikely when I think about, well, yesterday.
Exactly. And the evidence mostly points the other way.
Hmm.
Think about Willem Wagenaar, this Dutch psychologist. He kept a detailed diary for 6 years.
6 years.
Wow. Yeah, noting down significant events each day.
Mm-hmm.
But when he tested himself years later, sure, recent stuff was fine, but a big chunk, maybe 20% of the oldest memories, they were just gone.
Gone. Not just hard to recall, but like, poof.
Pretty much, like they never
Yes.
happened to him, even though he'd written them down.
Okay, that definitely shakes the idea of perfect recording.
Yeah, the scientific view now is that true photographic memory, like perfect recall of visual snapshots, is incredibly rare. Maybe one documented case ever.
Huh.
Our brains hold traces, sure, but it's not a flawless video playback system.
Right. So, okay, photographic memory, probably a myth. But then, how did Simonides do his thing in that collapsed hall? Which brings us to these mnemonic techniques, right? Like the memory palace.
Exactly, and this is where it gets really interesting because it shows what our memories are good at. They didn't evolve for like abstract numbers or shopping lists.
Right. More like navigating the savannah, finding the good berry bushes.
Precisely. Physical spaces, vivid experiences, things with emotional weight. That's where elaborative encoding comes in, making information meaningful, engaging. The more hooks, the better it sticks.
And Simonides, he was basically using the layout of the hall, a familiar space, to organize the names.
He leveraged his spatial awareness. And think about it, how easily can you picture the layout of a house you've only been in once, briefly?
Yeah, actually, surprisingly well sometimes.
Ed Cook, who we'll talk more about later, makes this point in the book.
Yeah.
A quick walk around often gives you a pretty solid mental map. We just soak up spatial stuff naturally.
Okay, so how do we use that? Like for my shopping list, say I need, I don't know, pickled garlic, cottage cheese, and I need to call the dentist. How does the palace work?
Okay, first, pick a place you know really well. Your childhood home is often perfect. Got it.
Yep, picturing it now.
Right. Now take a mental walk. Start outside, at the end of your driveway maybe. Picture a massive glowing jar of pickled garlic. Really see it. Maybe it smells super strong. Make it vivid. Absurd, even.
Okay. Giant, slightly radioactive-looking garlic jar. Got it. By my old bike shed.
Perfect. Now walk up to your front door. What's next?
Right.
Cottage cheese.
Yeah?
Okay, picture a bathtub overflowing with cottage cheese right there on the porch. Maybe someone tiny is swimming in it. Make it weird, multi-sensory.
Ugh. Okay. Cottage cheese tub where the welcome mat should be. That's memorable. Disturbing, but memorable.
Exactly. That's the point. Now go inside. Living room. Dentist. Maybe the dentist is doing a tap dance on your coffee table wearing a giant toothbrush costume.
Aha. Okay, tap dancing dentist. Got it.
The more bizarre, funny or even gross the images, and the more senses you involve, the stronger the hook. Remember that weird Rhea Perlman Minute Bowl image from the book?
Oh, yeah, that was unforgettable.
It's that principle.
Uh,
And Foer found, even in his early tries, this method worked surprisingly well for lists.
it feels so much more active than just repeating the list over and over. Okay, shifting gears a bit. What about expertise? Because some people seem to have these insane memories, but just for one specific thing.
That's a really good observation. While general photographic memory is likely out, specialized memory within an area of expertise is absolutely real. Think London taxi drivers.
Oh yeah, the knowledge, navigating thousands of straits.
Exactly. Or expert waiters remembering complex orders for big tables, no notepad. Doctors, chess players, musicians,
Hmm?
they all develop these incredible domain-specific memory skills.
So their brains become like specially tuned for that information.
Maybe not tuned differently in structure, but definitely used differently. There's this concept, the Baker-Baker paradox.
Oh,
Heard of it?
that vaguely refresh my memory.
Okay, if you tell someone this man is a baker,
Yeah.
and tell someone else this man's last name is Baker, who's more likely to remember it later?
The first one, the profession.
Right. Because baker, the job, immediately connects to a whole network of ideas, right? Bread, ovens, flour, maybe a white hat.
Yeah, it has meaning. The name is just a sound.
Exactly. It's just a label. The job title gets embedded in meaning. So to remember a name like, say, Foer, you could picture someone rowing with 4 oars.
Ah, creating a visual link, making it meaningful, even if it's a bit silly.
Precisely. And that's key. Research backs this up. Medal athletes, those memory competitors, and London cabbies. When they're memorizing, even abstract stuff like numbers, their brain scans often show way more activity in areas linked to visual memory and spatial navigation compared to control subjects.
So they're using the visual and spatial parts of their brain, even for numbers.
Seems like it. It's not that they have fundamentally different brains, structure-wise. They're just using the standard equipment much more effectively, applying these learned techniques.
Okay, so they've trained themselves, which leads to the next question. What are the limits? Can we train past them? We all hit that feeling of like brain full.
Yeah, that's likely your working memory bumping its head. It's got a notoriously small capacity. George Miller called it the magical number 7, plus or minus 2.
Right, like you can hold about 7 digits in your head easily, but much more gets tricky.
Exactly. And that information fades in seconds unless you actively rehearse it.
Which is why just repeating a phone number often fails if you get distracted. But the book mentions this student, SF, who massively increased his digit span. How?
SF used a technique called chunking. Instead of seeing individual digits like 314159, he started grouping them into meaningful chunks.
Like seeing 3.14 as pi. Or maybe race times,
Exactly like that. He'd turn strings of numbers into things meaningful to him, running times, dates. And he encoded these chunks directly into long-term memory over hundreds of hours of practice.
Hundreds of.
Yeah, serious dedication. He went from remembering about 7 digits to remembering 80.
80. Wow. So he wasn't really expanding his working memory, but bypassing it, creating shortcuts.
Pretty much, yeah. Straight to long-term storage via meaningful chunks. And you see something similar with chess experts, right?
Yeah, their memory for board positions is legendary.
Totally. Grandmasters don't necessarily have higher IQs overall, but their recall for game positions is phenomenal. They don't see individual pieces like novices do. They see patterns, relationships, chunks of meaning built up over years.
They literally see the board differently.
Their eyes even move differently. They focus on the important squares, absorb the structure way more efficiently. And that memory for a specific board can last for hours, even days. It's a hallmark of their expertise.
So it's about organizing information, not just raw capacity. Now, this idea of deliberate practice comes up. It sounds crucial, but it's not just practicing a lot, is it?
No, definitely not. And Anders Ericsson's work is key here. Deliberate practice isn't just repetition. It's highly focused, aiming specifically at improving something you're not good at yet.
Pushing yourself beyond your comfort zone.
Exactly. Identifying weaknesses, setting specific, tough goals, and crucially getting constant feedback. It's how you avoid hitting that okay plateau.
Okay, Gotcha.
Yeah, where you get reasonably good at something and just stop improving because you're comfortable. Regular practice often leads there. Deliberate practice is designed to keep pushing the ceiling up.
The book used doctors and mammographers as an example, right? About the feedback loop.
Yeah, that was interesting. Both gain experience, but studies suggested surgeons tend to improve more consistently over time than mammographers' reading scans. Why?
Feedback.
Likely a big part of it. Surgeons often get relatively quick feedback. Did the surgery work? How's the patient? Mammographers might not find out if they missed something for months or years, if ever.
Ah, so that delayed or absent feedback makes it much harder to learn from mistakes and refine the skill deliberately.
Precisely. That timely, specific feedback is just vital for real improvement.
Makes total sense. Okay, let's turn to something quite different and frankly, quite tragic. The case of EP and extreme memory loss.
Right. EP's story is incredibly illuminating, though sad. He suffered severe damage to his hippocampus, a region vital for forming new memories.
And the result was profound amnesia.
Both kinds. Anterograde amnesia, he couldn't form any new memories after his illness, and significant retrograde amnesia, he lost decades of memories from before the illness.
The book has these heartbreaking details, like him not recognizing the researcher who visited him hundreds of times.
Yeah, or having no memory of huge events like the moon landing, even though he lived through them. It's hard to even imagine.
So what could he still do? Did all memory vanish?
No, and that's what's fascinating. His case really highlights the difference between declarative memory facts and events you consciously recall.
Like what you had for breakfast or the capital of France.
Exactly. That was essentially gone for anything new.
Mm.
But his non-declarative memory or implicit memory skills, habits, learned responses that don't require conscious thought that was largely intact.
So like muscle memory.
Kind of. He could still learn tasks through repetition, even if he had no memory of having learned them. He'd go for his daily walk around the block, following the same route.
Even though he couldn't consciously remember the route. Or even his own address.
Right. His body knew the way implicitly, even if his conscious mind couldn't access that knowledge or form a new memory of the walk itself.
Wow. It's like learning on autopilot. It also makes you think about infant amnesia, why we don't remember being babies.
It's a really interesting parallel. A lot of our earliest learning, walking, talking basics, how the physical world works, is primarily implicit, non-declarative.
We learn it, it shapes us, but we can't consciously retrieve the episode of learning it later.
Exactly. Plus, as infants, we lack the language and conceptual frameworks to encode those experiences in a way our adult declarative memory system can later access. So, in a way, we all start out a bit like EP.
That's a mind-bending thought. Okay, from the absence of memory to, well, the extreme cultivation of it, let's talk about competitive memory. It sounds like a whole other world.
Oh, it is. The World Memory Championship. It's basically a mental decathlon. 10 different events over 3 days, pushing memory to its absolute limits.
What kind of events?
Memorizing 1,000-year-long epic poems, lists of random words, faces, and names, abstract images, shuffled decks of cards, sometimes multiple decks, those incredibly long strings of binary digits.
Binary digits, just ones and zeros. How do they even do that?
With incredibly elaborate systems. The book mentions Ben Pridmore, a champion. For cards, he apparently uses a 2-card system. Each pair of cards translates into one specific image.
So 52 cards become just 26 images.
Exactly, which he then places in his memory palace. And for binary, he converts chunks of like 10 digits into single images.
Yeah.
Highly complex stuff.
And then there's Ed Cook, who coached Foer. He sounds like quite a character with his own systems, like the Millennium PAO.
Ed's definitely a central figure, known for being innovative, maybe a bit eccentric. His Millennium PAO system is super sophisticated. PAO stands for Person Action Object.
Okay.
So every 3-digit number from 700 to 999 corresponds to a unique person doing a specific action with a particular object. It lets you weave these incredibly detailed, memorable stories for long number sequences.
That sounds intense, creating 1,000 little dramas.
And Ed really emphasizes making them vivid, emotional, funny, tapping into that elaborative encoding we talked about.
And Foer himself trained for the U.S. Championship, right? And actually won an event.
He did. He won the Speed Cards event, memorizing a shuffled deck. His whole journey, from being skeptical about his own memory to becoming a national champion, it really underlines that these techniques work.
It wasn't innate talent, it was training.
It was dedicated training,
Yeah.
applying the strategies consistently. It's a powerful case study showing memory isn't fixed. It's a skill you can seriously improve.
Which really connects to the next topic, memory in education. Because there's been this big debate, hasn't there, about whether schools should even bother with memorization anymore?
Absolutely. Historically, rote memorization was king. You learned poems, dates, facts by heart. That was education.
But then things shifted, right?
I see.
Especially with progressive education.
Yeah, in the 20th century, the focus shifted towards critical thinking, understanding, creativity. Rote learning got a bad rap. seen as passive, maybe even stifling.
Just drill and kill, not real learning.
That was the argument. But the book introduces Raymond Matthews, a teacher with a different take. He argues that actually, a strong memory foundation is essential for higher-level thinking.
How so?
His point is, you can't think critically about something if you don't know anything about it first. You need that base of readily accessible knowledge.
Like, you can't analyze the causes of the Civil War if you don't know the basic facts and timeline.
Exactly. So he uses memory techniques to help his students memorize chunks of their history textbook. He believes this foundation doesn't hinder critical thinking, it enables it. He sees memorizing and learning not as opposites, but as linked. Effective memorization is a form of deep engagement.
So it's not mindless repetition, but actively encoding the information using techniques that make it stick, making it usable for deeper thought later.
That's the idea. And the book also mentions Tony Buzan and mind mapping, right?
Yeah, mind maps, those visual diagrams.
Buzan was a big proponent of mnemonics. Mind mapping was his tool for organizing information virally, radially, supposedly mirroring how the brain links ideas. The aim was better understanding and memory.
Do they actually work?
Well, some of Buzan's broader brain claims are debated, but research does suggest mind mapping can be a pretty effective note-taking and studying technique for improving retention and recall, compared to just linear notes.
Interesting. Okay, now for perhaps the most mind-bending part, savant memory. Daniel Tammet and Kim Peek. Their abilities seem almost otherworldly.
They are extraordinary cases, and seemingly quite different from each other. Daniel Tammet became famous for reciting pi to thousands of places, and for his synesthesia, experiencing numbers as shapes, colors, textures.
Right, he described numbers having personalities, almost. And he initially said he didn't use mnemonics, it was just how his brain worked.
That was the initial presentation, yeah, this effortless innate ability. It led many to see him as a natural savant. But there's been some debate.
Oh, what kind of debate?
While some researchers noted inconsistencies when his synesthetic descriptions were tested under controlled conditions, plus some reluctance on his part to undergo certain memory tests led to speculation.
Speculation.
That perhaps learned mnemonic techniques, maybe even similar to those used by memory athletes, might be playing a role, even if subconsciously. The line isn't always clear.
Okay, contrast that with Kim Peek, the inspiration for Rain Man. His memory seemed different.
Very different, it seems. Kim had this vast encyclopedic knowledge across tons of subjects. He reportedly read books incredibly fast, absorbing and retaining huge amounts of information almost automatically, unconsciously.
Like just scanning the pages.
Apparently, yes.
Yeah.
And he could make these incredible, sometimes unexpected connections between facts from totally different domains. His abilities seemed deeply linked to his unique brain structure, not learned techniques in the same way.
So one may be using techniques consciously or not, the other just absorbing everything.
That's how it often appears, yes.
Yeah.
Which leads to this little Rain Man theory mentioned in the book.
The idea that we all have dormant savant abilities.
Kind of. The theory gets some traction from cases where people develop savant-like skills after brain injury, often to the left hemisphere. It suggests maybe the left brain normally inhibits these kinds of raw, calculation-heavy abilities that might be latent in the right brain.
So our logical left brain keeps the potentially overwhelming Rain Man abilities in check.
That's the speculative idea, yeah, that our brains are doing massive unconscious processing, and in savants, more of that becomes accessible. But it's still very much a theory.
And the questions around Tammet, the inconsistencies in his synesthesia descriptions, they do muddy the waters a bit about purely natural savantism versus highly developed skill.
It really does. It highlights how complex these cases are and how difficult it can be to definitively separate innate ability from learned practice skill, especially at such extreme levels.
Fascinating, but definitely complex. Okay, so wrapping up, Foer goes to the World Memory Championship himself. He even gets inducted into this bizarre club, the KL7.
Yeah, the KL7 initiation sounds unique, a very specific ritual involving some unusual food items, part of the subculture.
But the main point is, even after all this training, massively increasing his digit span, winning an event, he still forgets everyday things, right? Like where he put his keys.
Exactly, and that's such a relatable, crucial point. Excelling in memory competitions using specific techniques doesn't magically cure everyday absent-mindedness. They're different things.
But his journey still shows something powerful, doesn't it?
Absolutely. The key takeaway isn't that you'll suddenly have perfect recall for everything. It's the demonstration of what focused, deliberate practice can achieve. Training the mind, pushing its limits in one area, can lead to results that seem extraordinary from the outside.
It really makes you wonder what else we could train our minds to do.
That's the big question, isn't it?
Okay, so let's try and pull the threads together from this deep dive. We've gone from ancient Greece and the birth of memory art,
To debunking the myth of that perfect photographic memory.
explored the power of techniques like the memory palace, built on how our brains actually like to remember things,
Looked at how memory fuels expertise and how experts aren't just born with it.
considered the devastating effects of severe memory loss through EP's story.
And touched on the really mind-bending world of competitive memory and the ongoing debates about savant abilities.
Ew, that was a lot.
It was. But the core message, hopefully for everyone listening, is pretty clear. Your memory isn't just fixed hardware. It's software you can upgrade. It's a skill.
It can be trained, improved significantly with the right approach and, yeah, putting in the effort.
Definitely needs the effort.
So maybe here's the final thought to leave you with. Just take a moment and think what parts of your life, your work, your learning, your hobbies could really benefit from applying some of these ideas. From more focused learning, from using memory techniques.
What extraordinary things, even small ones in your own context, might you be capable of if you approach learning and remembering a bit more deliberately?
Something to chew on. We definitely encourage you to maybe explore some of these ideas further. Perhaps even give a simple memory palace a try.
You might surprise yourself.
Thanks so much for joining us for this deep dive into the truly amazing world of human memory.